Good evening.
Hey, what's up, man? How you doing?
Good. It's a hot
still
day
sunny out there, huh?
Yeah. It's still pretty bright. We'll have another half an hour probably. Probably go get through the debate before it.
Looks like a great day out on the West Coast, yeah?
Yeah, it's air conditioner time. We don't get many of those in Seattle. Most people don't own an air conditioner.
Oh, really? Gosh, it's a necessity down here. But all right, so first off, hey, thank you, Nelson, for being flexible. I did not have the baby yet, but we did go to the hospital and we did get hooked up to monitors for a long time before we ultimately got released. It's it's kind of crazy.
I saw you posted you're going for a vasectomy.
Yeah, man. Hey,
you're going for a vasectomy.
Hey, three is good. I got an heir and 2 spared, so I can pass on
Three's company.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, man. I think I'm good. And I don't know. I guess it's easier for like them to do it than the woman. So I'll go. But hey, she gives birth to a kid, I can get my ball snapped, right?
Yeah.
But so first off, I want to thank Nelson for taking this flexible and rescheduling. So that the topic of the debate, naturalism by itself is enough to provide a foundation for morality. I'm going to tell a story. I'm going to define a couple of terms, and then I'm going to tell another story, kind of as my opening statement. Then I'll pass it over to you.
Carry over.
So
go ahead.
Yeah. So Nelson, when you're at the grocery store, you're like, you're like the second person in line. There's a dude checking out in front of you, and there's an item that can't be scanned, right? What is the number one thing that people say when like the cashier can't scan an item and it just keeps, over and over again, she's trying and it's not ringing up?
I guess it's on the house.
Exactly. That's exactly it. That's it. That's what everyone says. They say, I guess it's on the house. And I will tell you, I hate that conversation. I guess I hate banal conversations in general, but I especially hate that to be a cashier. And it drives me crazy when I hear that. So whenever I'm at the grocery store and something doesn't ring up, I try to come up with a little dumb conversation filler. I asked that cashier, well, how do we know that this exists? And so the cashier, depending on, I guess, maybe what they know about this sort of thing, they'll come at me with, we know it exists because we can see it, because we can feel it, because we can touch it. And I'll try to push back on them a little bit, and try to do some little, cute little philosophical thought experiments that show the problems with empiricism, the flaws with empiricism. Our senses can be deceived. Empiricism is a self-validating form of reasoning. Just to try, basically, I try to make them think that nothing's real and we're all living in a computer simulation or something. Now, I myself am an empiricist. I accept that there are certain flaws in empiricism. Now, those flaws are not necessarily enough to bother me, to make me think that we are living in a computer simulation, or that reality is not what's apparent. Even if there is some sort of reasoning you can come up with that might pose a problem, I accept those problems. Now, I bring this up, empiricism, not because I think it's analogous to this question. I know you posted about how we could talk about either moral truth or just truth in general, and I think it kind of goes along the same line of reasoning. If we substituted out foundation for morality to foundation for knowing anything exists, I would probably use about the same sort of arguments. So that's just kind of my preface there. That yes, there are problems, but they're really not necessarily problems that people should be worried too much about. So the kind of the classic example is like, how can you condemn Hitler? Well, I can't say that Hitler absolutely was amoral. but I can at least take a pretty good enough guess that it doesn't bother me. Now, I might be getting ahead of myself a little bit, so let me take it back a couple steps here, and we'll get through some definitions. So first off, morality. This is just coming from the dictionary. Principles concerning the distinction between right and wrong, or good and bad behavior. Does that work for you?
Yeah, that's what I was to say. I was to say morality, which is defining right and wrong. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And then so naturalism. So naturalism is the idea that only the natural, as opposed to the supernatural or spiritual laws, are operate the world. It's kind of like a mid-20th century philosophy. This was been kind of a heyday. Practitioners George Santayana, Willard Van Orman. So just basically, there's no ghosts, and we can see, measure, and understand theoretically everything that structures the world. So that's what naturalism is. So getting to the meat of the argument itself, I'm gonna kind of tell another story or try to paint another little picture here to sort of illustrate my point. So I'm gonna take us back to the state of nature, right? So 2,000 or 200,000 years ago, we're on the plains of Africa. Complex societies has not evolved. We're hunting wildebeests. Humans, we're not very fast. We're not very strong, but we're awful tasty. But yet, in my view, we've evolved and we've become masters of this earth. And how we did that is through working together. So we're on the plains of the Serengeti, or is the Serengeti in Africa? I don't know.
Yeah, so.
We're on the plains of Africa. We're hunting a wildebeest. We take down this wildebeest. Now the question comes: how do we divvy up the meat? If someone was to act in what I would call an amoral way, or to maybe try to take all the meat and run, well, people aren't going to work with him in the future. If we come up with some sort of system, maybe an egalitarian system, or a system based upon need, some sort of system that could be considered moral or would work for everyone, well, in the future, we're going to come together. We're going to work on different things. Maybe we're going to work on carving wheels out of stones. It will increase our odds of survival if we act in a moral way. That's my premise one for naturalism, providing for morality. My second premise here is morality stems from empathy. So we've evolved ability to reason. We've evolved higher thought, and with that, we can imagine how somebody else might feel. We can put ourselves into somebody else's shoes, and we can we can, so to speak, feel their pain. And because of that, we realize that we ought, or at least most of us, ought to compose ourselves in such a way to reduce that pain, to act in a moral way, to act in a good way towards our neighbors. And I'm actually going to throw up the law of reciprocity, because I think it's pretty good moral principle. And the law of reciprocity, some might call it the golden rule. The westernized version, or probably the version most people are familiar with, is do unto others as they would have do unto you. And the law of reciprocity can actually be found in thousands, countless different moral systems, not just like a Judeo-Christian system or even a Western-centric system. You can find versions of it pretty much anywhere where we can find moral writings. It's a pretty common thing. And I think, like I said, I think that stems from our ability to reason. I think that it stems from our ability to empathize, and from there, then we can actually go forward and we have this sense of morality in us. We can get maybe a little bit more complicated with it, start throwing around deontology or what have you, start actually really thinking about it. But I'm gonna pass it back over to you there for you to do your thing.
Okay. So you brought up quite a few things there. I think I've got a little opening statement I'll read in a minute, but your take on the kind of metaphysics of what is real is true, right? Kantian view of how we observe things, we really can't say necessarily that through the physical observation of objects, through the senses, that is, that we have a true accurate view of what is. You go in it like you were talking about the Serengeti, you're thirsty, you're out in the Serengeti and you see a giant lake, you run to it, it's not actually there, right? So though we observed it through our senses, turns out it's not real. And so the senses do play a lot of tricks on us. And so we can't necessarily, and so this is why I think strengthens my view that, I'm an economist and I argued with Joe about this, the idea of Austrian economics versus a more empirical scientific view of economics, that the Austrian Mises believed in a priori, which is knowledge is within the individual, which I think, again, this kind of violates, I think, his view of naturalism. He was a naturalist, an atheistic naturalist. He believed in the physiochemical aspects of the brain. He thought the brain and the mind were just a different way to call the same thing, but he didn't believe in the actual mind. So anyways, I think there's much more to the world than just the empirical view, and I think it's important that we go far beyond that. And Murphy talks about the Pythagorean theorem as an example of that. It's something that's always true. It's universal, whether or not we can come up with the real world and say, Pythagorean theorem doesn't actually work because it's curved space, doesn't negate the Pythagorean theorem as a axiom. I was going to say morality and naturalism. I think what works versus what is right and wrong, these are not necessarily the same thing. And so if something works, you're saying we found that this works, and therefore it seems to kind of imply that it's moral. Just working doesn't mean necessarily that it is moral, right? I think everybody would agree with that. And so there's that. There's reason. Now something I really get into, and one of the reasons I really like these debates is the idea of reason and where does reason come from? Can reason evolve? And I would argue that reason cannot evolve. It's like, how would you know that reason works? Like, how do we know that reason works if it just evolved? We have to use reason to show that reason works, right? Now, prove to me that reason is valid without using reason. Because it's just circular logic, right?
Yeah.
I assume this is true, and then I go prove the thing, begging the question, assuming which is true, and then proving it. So I think without reason, you cannot prove that reason is true, and so it's just the idea that it evolved. In fact, there's a story that Dr. Phil Fernandez does this story. He's given it a few times. There's a woman on a train. I was going to say the man from Nantucket, but no, just kidding. But the woman on the train. How'd they get in there? There's a woman on a train to Scotland. I've told this some of the other debates, and she's never been to Scotland. She's leaving London, and she looks out the window, and there's a hill with a bunch of rocks that on the side of the hill form "Welcome to Scotland." Now she can assume that those rocks just came there by chance through evolutionary process, or she can assume that it was a creator being with reason and knowledge of the area and intelligence that formed that rock formation, right? Now, the former, if she assumes that it just came through evolutionary process, what can she assume about the sign? Nothing, right? Because it just happened. I mean, it could have just, she could be in what Piccadilly, right outside London somewhere. She could have gone the wrong way. She's down in Staines or something. But if she assumes that it was put there by an intelligent being, then she can say, okay, then there is validity to that sign, and I can assume that indeed I am in Scotland. And so I think reason is the same thing. If we assume that reason came from a creator with perfect reason, no, we don't have. Reason is perfect. Our use of it is not. But if we assume that reason came from a perfect creator, then reason is valid, right? But I think without that, it's very difficult to show that reason is a valid and applicable thing in the world. So I'll get to my statement here. So the claim here is that naturalism is itself is enough to provide a foundation for morality. Now, foundation implies a platform in which you can on which you can build a view and make moral judgments, right? I think usually we say platform or foundation. It's an unmoving structure. So foundation requires solid ground and unchanging supports. But by definition, naturalism and evolution, which is kind of one and the same for the most part, natural outcomes is always changing, and therefore can be no such foundation. So I think it's like building a house upon sand, saying that you would build morality upon a foundation of naturalism. And universal, yeah. So I think that's good. I guess the golden rule. Oops. Another idea is the golden rule. I forget who it was who called man how does the golden rule get to all societies? I mean, like you said, pretty much every society has some version of the golden rule. Every religion has some version of the golden rule. It's the Christian says, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And then there's in the Quran, I think it says something, as others do to you, so do to them. And then there's the various religions have just the same words. They just move them around a little bit. But how does that come about in a naturalist view? I think it might be Dawkins or somebody says man is a God-obsessed ape. Now the question is why is man obsessed with God? We don't see other animals doing this, and why is this inherent within all of man? How do these things, if they're just naturally occurring, how do they come about with everybody at the same time, I guess?
Sure. So, all right. You pass it back to me? Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So I'll kind of I'll take them in the your rebuttals in the order I got them written down. So first off, what works versus what is moral. So my own moral. I'm a consequentialist, a hedonistic utilitarian. I actually what I would call what working is what reduces pain and increases happiness. And I would say what does that in the aggregate, when applied across the board, it is what's moral. And there's actually a lot of people that take up that worldview. Now, I understand that there is what we might consider moral dilemmas that this could lead to. I guess the 101 level of such a moral dilemma would be like the trolley car problem. You've heard of that before?
Maybe. I'm not sure. You want to maybe explain it?
Yeah, I'll run into it. I mean, it's not super relevant, but this is just an example of a moral dilemma. Interesting. So, yeah, you might get a kick out of it. So, you're a switchman on a trolley car. Now this is a thought experiment, so like some of it like a little the top, but roll with it. On the way that the train is coming right now, if you did nothing, it would run over one man that's tied to a track. You know nothing about this man; he's just the generic man. As the switchman, excuse me, I have this backwards. So if you do nothing, there's four men that will get run over and they'll get killed. As a switchman, you can pull the switch and you can divert it to the other track. On that track, there's one man that's lying and could get killed. That that's supposed to kind of show like what could be a moral dilemma. And I mean, you could apply this to any moral. There's really no right answer to this. You can apply it to any code of morality. And I guess my own view on it as a consequentialist is, it's hard for me to evaluate life, to put a value on an individual life. I can't. That's kind of one of the critiques of consequentialism, like how do you evaluate a life? But assuming it's less than infinity, and assuming that they're all of moral equal worth, you should probably save the 4. But anyway, so getting back to the original question, what works versus what is moral? I mean, that it actually is kind of what I base my morality on, what works to reduce pain and increase happiness. Now, you talked about your Scotland story, which I always enjoy hearing. Hey, man, it's a classic. So for that, I think that would have to, she would have to examine context. So, and of course, in this particular instance, it would be spot on to assume that there was a creator of a sign in Scotland, because we can look around and we can point out exactly who that creator was. So you could probably go and look up the property deed and find out, who owns it, and maybe even find out who was commissioned to build the sign. Now, can we apply that to the universe? Can we look around and can we see our creator? I would say no. Some people disagree with me. I haven't seen it, but maybe.
Right.
Maybe
well, I mean, it's the analogy there is to reason, right? So it's the idea, if we assume reason just evolved,
right,
then can you trust it?
Yeah, and that's kind of where my next point was leading. So where does reason come from? How can we trust it? So I think that I'm active in the sort of secular atheist community, and one thing that bothers me, and I think is an indefensible position for atheists to take, is to say that there is no, what I might call, leaps of faith. So being an atheist or being a secularist is without faith, and I disagree with that. And what I would say is, where I put my faith is that I can trust my senses, that I can trust my reason, and as you pointed out, and as I agree, I'm not going to argue that it is begging the question when you break it down. It is actually. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, in a great debate, Dawkins versus John Lennox, Dawkins was going on, and he's saying you can't have faith and reason at the same time. They're dichotomies. And then Lennox goes and says, well, surely, Richard, you have reason to have faith in your wife. And of course, Dawkins is like, well, yes, of course. And then the whole audience laughed at him. He's like, what's going on here? I don't understand.
Yeah, I would agree with him. There's no, he's not Saint Dawkins, at least to me. Maybe there's somebody else, but I would disagree with him on that point. And actually, there's a lot of other sort of secularist thinkers, and I actually think Dawkins might get like a bit too much. I don't know, suck up a little bit too much of the conversation for sort of the philosophy of atheism. He's famous, and I don't doubt he does great work, especially in the fields of what he actually studies. Biological evolution stuff, but I think he kind of sucks up the air, and I think that would be where I would disagree with him. I have faith, and I have faith that I can trust my senses. Now, with that faith, I acknowledge that like you pointed out, mirages happen. It's not infallible, and one ought to sort of examine the whole picture, a holistic view of it. Maybe if nobody else sees the mirage, maybe I should question whether it exists or not. So going down to so where does reciprocity come from? How can it be in so many places, so many different cultures, and why do so many different cultures try to reach out to a God figure? So I'll take that one. So you brought up a priori knowledge, and you said that it could contradict naturalism, evolution, and I actually disagree. A priori knowledge as the absolute source of knowledge, yeah, I don't necessarily accept that, but some level of a priori knowledge, I'm willing to accept. So as I pointed out in my opening statement, morality coming from evolution, the law of reciprocity, or how people word it, could be an evolved trait. It could come a priori. as a product of natural selection. And then I look at something like, a jellyfish that, there's not really a lot going on there in the mind of a jellyfish. Maybe there is. I don't know. And I've never talked to one. But they can still act in an instinctual manner. They can still act in a manner that will allow them to survive. And I see this law of reciprocity as sort of the same thing. So maybe on some deep-seated ancient part of our mammalian brain, there is a sense of reciprocity. And actually, you can even see it in other communal-based animals. So elephants, for example, will actually risk their own life to save another elephant that's not even related to them. That just they're as part of their little, I think they call them pods, their little community. They'll risk their life. They'll show some what one might call reciprocity or morality.
But we also see them attack each other and fight and kill animals, and we would never say that's immoral. Correct.
Yeah, of course not. And we see that in well.
So I think it's difficult to say that they act morally. Sometimes when they do the opposite, we're not going to say it's immoral.
Well, I'm saying it. I don't want to put morality because I'm kind of tied it back to reason's part of morality. So the ability to reason's part of it, but they're at least showing something that smells a little bit like one might expect from a morally acting creature. But of course, we see humans doing really his acts too. And then
and I mean, again, we kind of call them. People like to say that's evil, right? I mean, we talk about Hitler as being evil, and in everybody, and this is why the debate on Tuesday with your other friend is that I think everybody knows evil exists, but if we say evil, this goes back to the not Chesterton, but the Mere Christianity author. I'm totally blanking on one of the most famous guys in the world. But anyways, the idea that if evil exists, therefore good exists. If good exists, therefore moral laws exist, right? But moral laws are prescriptive, and moral laws require a prescriber, like a doctor's note, right? You need a prescription to go get the drugs from your pharmacy, and that requires someone that under the law has a higher power than you, has the authority to prescribe the drugs to you. Well, in morality's case, it's my contention that we require someone above ourselves, someone outside the physical universe, to prescribe these moral laws to us.
Sure. So, so two things there. So first off, I know we did debate natural rights. I may be contradicting some of the stuff I said there with this next statement, but I actually take a sort of an agnostic view towards moral laws. I don't know that they exist, and I also know that I can't necessarily prove that they don't. But with that, the fact that they're not refutable tells me that it's. Are you familiar with like something ought to be refutable for it to be considered a justified belief?
The negation principle. I think. Something. Yeah. You have to it has to be proven, or there has to be a possibility of proving it, the negative or something like that. Yeah,
exactly. And to my mind, I can't necessarily think of a way, at least something that is good enough for me that disproves moral law. Hold on, let me rephrase. That disproves objective moral law or absolute moral law. So it doesn't really pass that test.
I do think I would, again, kind of what I said in the debate on Tuesday, the idea that everybody inherently knows that there is a right and wrong. And, I mentioned the philosopher that gets up in the classroom. I've got the G.K. Chesterton long quote. I won't read it again, but it's the idea that the man goes and tells the soldier that he's immoral for killing people, and then he gets in the philosophy classroom and says he should have killed them. Tells those people they should have killed themselves, and right, it's the contradictory principles of moral relativism.
Hey, man.
And
hey, I know a lot of philosophy professors, and I gotta take that class. Maybe that, I don't know. That's like existentialism or something. I haven't taken that one.
Yeah,
I've never.
It's the idea that
Say again?
Yeah, so you can get up and say, oh, it's the idea that the philosopher can get up in the classroom and say there is no such thing as right and wrong. It's just how you personally believe. And somebody asked Ravi Zacharias once, a student, is like, why? What are you afraid of? Why are you afraid of relative moral laws? And he got up and says, well, Joel, do you lock your door at night?
Sure do.
Because the question was, why are you afraid of moral relativism? Are you afraid everybody's just going to become an animal or something? And by the way, Nietzsche said they would. Right? Nietzsche said we would become animals and we would commit mass murders, and he was right. He's probably the most influential 19th century philosopher on the 20th century. Is when you detach the earth from the sun, as he said in The Madman, which is a great poem. But then you detach the earth from its sun, you really lose all basis for morality. And this is an atheist saying that's why he needed the Ubermach, someone to get up and tell us what right and wrong is. Otherwise, we do become like the animals. We just run around, do whatever we want. Do what thou wilt. That is the whole of the law. The Satanic Bible, I think.
Yeah.
So it's, but the moral philosopher will get up in the classroom and say, oh, there's no such thing as right and wrong. It's just whatever is good for any individual. And then he goes out to his car and he finds his window broken and he's demanding justice, right? He's demanding to be righted for the evil and the wrong that has been done to him. So like we inherently know that there is right and wrong. And no matter what we get up and pronounce, we try to fit ideas or certain desires we have, and we try to find moral philosophies that fit them, rather than what I would say we should do is fit our beliefs into the way things actually are, which would just be my claim that the moral foundation of the world, we could say that there is a right and wrong, and that we should recognize that. We could say Hitler's wrong. You know, you've got 3 kids or 2.5 kids, yeah. We'll say. And the idea of someone sacrificing one or something, you know, I mean, you're going to say that's evil, right? Everybody watching like that is evil, and that person needs to be something done to him, right? And we say that is a objective, universal truth, that sacrificing children is evil. And so I think people would believe that, even if they wouldn't say it.
Yeah. So, like I said before, with Hitler sacrificing my children, that's a funny image in my mind. It's kind of sick I just went there, but that's all right. So, like I said, there's a difference between what I'm saying is I cannot absolutely say it's wrong, but I feel like I'm at least close enough to act upon it to be willing to enlist. Withholding the possibility that I am missing something is not reason for concern enough to say that I'm, you know, a moral nihilist or something like that. It's just withholding just a small kernel of what I would call absolute unreasonable doubt, but just the possibility that I'm wrong. But like I said, I'm still close enough based upon my understanding of the world, of the universe, how pain exists, how pain makes me feel, to not wish that upon other people, and to see if somebody else is increasing pain, is doing things that I would not want done to me, and is doing that on a massive scale, or doing that to anyone. Well, then yeah, I think that, you know, as a scrapping, fit, young 28-year-old veteran, I should get out there. I should get out there.
Well, you said you.
Yeah.
Well, you did say you follow Peter Singer, right?
Peter Singer, yeah. Yeah.
And now I believe he says that you should be given at least 1 week. And he agrees. He says, hey, it's just it's a subjective viewpoint of giving it 1 week, right? After the child is born, we should be given 1 week.
Oh, yeah.
Before we decide whether it's a viable life. I mean, he says that a pig is a more viable creature than your 1 week old son.
Well, that's getting into serious.
And I don't eat pig, yeah. But some people do. So maybe we should eat children, yeah. Right? Johnny Swift? Starving should eat babies.
Oh, the Irish guy, and like the was it like yeah? We should eat children of Ireland. Well, that's getting to Singer's. So what you're talking about is Singer's. He's talking about his definition of personhood. So he bases it on the ability to make choices and the ability to feel pain. And the 1 week thing, I would have to look it up because his views have evolved over time. He was
because we can say that children in the womb, we know they feel pain. I mean, you can watch videos of surgeries on babies that are in the womb. They're like 6 months along, so they're very premature, but they'll do some kind of surgery on them. The baby will reach out and grab the doctor's hand.
Yeah,
so these are viable.
Yeah, as I said before, I disagree with dogs. I don't I don't think that we should. I think that a baby does meet the criteria, personally, especially as he laid it out. I point to the kind of the Supreme Court reasoning in it, sort of when it can feel pain, that might be where we can draw the line and be like, hey, abortion's not cool anymore. 24 weeks or whatever the consensus is, or our understanding of it. I think it is 24 weeks is about when the nervous system develops enough to feel pain. But no, in my view, I would not say that we should give it 1 week. But I'd have to look into more the context of what he was saying or what he said it, because like I said, his views have evolved somewhat. We're going down the rabbit hole, but that's all right. I don't mind.
But I would say we would have to say that his views are not a proper foundation for morality because they evolve and they change, right? So this is kind of like a lot of the scientific views of the beginning of the world and evolution and naturalism, where they say, "Oh, this is what we know. This is true." Well, you can even another view would be the idea of global warming or global climate change, right? We say, if this happens, this will happen. And they're always changing, right? And they always tell you, hey, you must believe this or the world will end. And then you say, I don't really believe it. And then a year later, it didn't happen. Their predictions didn't happen. And they say, oh, but no, we're really serious this time, right? And it's just like, okay, once you come up with a unchanging foundational viewpoint for your worldview, then come talk to me, right?
Yeah, well, hey.
I would say that with naturalism as well, like the atheistic worldview. I think an agnostic worldview is a much more legitimate, reasoned point of view. You can say, well, because an atheist, although, I agree that most atheists say, well, I'm not really, I can't say, even Dawkins says he's 99.95.
The Dawkins scale.
Sure. You really push him. He's like, okay, I can't prove it, It might, but he makes his money. He makes a lot of money on that 99.5%. He doesn't make any money on the 0.5.
Well, and right? I think that's why most of the sort of thinkers that are, in my opinion, worth their salt are agnostic atheists. Because when you're a hard atheist, that shifts the burden of proof. When you say, I am absolutely sure that there is no God, well, then go and prove it. Which is, I think, a pretty tall order that maybe not anyone, in my opinion, has really jumped over to absolutely prove it. That's why there's the agnostic atheist, which is kind of taking up the stance like, prove to me that there is a God. So I want to talk about this word foundation real fast. Kind of talk about what I meant and. So what I meant with when I came up with the wording of this question is not quite what you're referring to. So I
understand.
Yeah. That. So when I refer to a foundation, I mean the conditions for morality to exist. Nothing that necessarily disallows it or contradicts it. The second law of logic that disproves it, so to speak. Not something immutable or unchanging, which I'm not going to say is not a fair interpretation of the word. If that's as you referred to it as definitely something that would come up in the dictionary.
It's difficult to come up with a really good specific label for these debates.
I know it's so hard. It really is so
hard. I had
the
last one on Tuesday. I made it, and I realized it was I had 4 points to prove, right? 45 minutes. It made it very difficult for myself, but I kind of have the idea that these four are necessary. But each individual is not sufficient, right? You need all four of them, so it takes a little bit. Am I echoing to you?
A little bit. I get a little loop. It's not too bad. It's not like I can't hear you or anything. So there's a couple things that I wanted to hit on that I have written down here. So you posited that, you know, or asked why do we see gods in all sorts of cultures? And I think kind of what ties on to that is the different versions of gods. So kind of the most ancient or the maybe perhaps the least complex gods that we might see in like a Stone Age type civilization. So maybe the same sort of gods that like, you know, North American native indigenous people worshipped, or, you know, something like animism, multiple gods stemming from coming from nature. And then that kind of evolves into sort of the polytheistic Greek type archetypes, or Odin or Zeus or all that sort, which kind of gives way towards, and as we see societies evolve and become more complex and start to think, well, you know, there's problems with this, you know, this view of God. So they change it around and then it becomes monotheistic. And which is kind of where we're at now. And then maybe what would I say, the next step would be, you know, you reject that God too. But so to get back to the question, why do all sorts of people in many different cultures think that there's a God? So you're familiar with Jung, right? Carl Jung?
Carl Jung, yeah. Carl Jung, yeah.
Yeah. Something's going on with your hardware. It's not too bad.
You hear me now?
Yeah, you're good. We got like an integrated mic or something on your laptop, or it's not too bad. Yeah, it's not bad. We can roll it. Okay. But so he points out a lot of archetypes. Flood myths, for example, are very, very common in many different cultures. Even something like the hero's journey, right? There's whole books written about how, you know, all myths can be traced back to Star Wars. But to answer the question, I see that as a product, as a thing of us trying to explain the unexplainable. So there's gaps in our knowledge that our brain's trying to fill, and that's kind of where we inject the God. We don't have much time, so I'm going to pass it back to you. I've been talking a hot minute here.
Okay, I'll just go ahead and give a final. I can point to you know, we're no such thing as evil, but everybody there is some evil that is echoing. That's pretty bad. But so many people that say there is no such thing as evil will turn around and call religion evil, a variety of other things evil. It's like everybody has a feeling or a sense that evil does exist, whether that's correct about what it is or not. Others thought there was good and there was evil, and there was evil. So the inherent sense of some kind of existing true is there. You would and but again, I'll go back to my the idea of requires some kind of unchanging, unmoving founder, I guess, that you would get your morality from. And I that has to be someone in authority who provides laws, and he must above us, and outside of the physical. Moral laws require fiber, and so I'll let you go back, and I'll see. I'm getting pretty bad audio, so I'll just
Okay, I think I think I was sort of picking up what you were laying down. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and reiterate. As a product of evolution, we have empathy, and we have a need to work together, and that is, to me, sufficient for morality to exist. I will say this, though, there's a moral philosophy, I'll call it, I don't remember the exact word, common sensitarian. Most moral dilemmas, or most problems that we face should I lie, cheat, and steal? At least for most of us, common sense kind of trumps those.
All right. Well, let me say thank you, Joel.
Yeah, thank you. Hey, we should do this topic